Hello and welcome to Calm the Farm podcast, where pharmacy business meets legal wisdom, minus the headache. In each episode, we share practical legal tips and real-life examples to help you run your pharmacy with confidence. I'm your host, Sarah Stoddart. Thanks very much for joining us. In the spirit of State of Origin season, today I'm focusing on a Queensland issue in this episode. So if you're a pharmacy owner outside of Queensland and you don't have an ownership interest in Queensland, this may not be relevant to you. However, if you are in Queensland, and a lot of our listeners are, this one is going to be an important episode to listen to. Today, I'm talking about the Queensland Pharmacy Business Ownership Council Pharmacy Business Licence application process. Now, we are more than 6 months into that process. We've hit 7 months today. We have 12 months from the date the legislation commenced, which was 1 November 2025, for the majority of pharmacy businesses in Queensland to lodge their pharmacy business licence applications. This is a regulatory requirement and all Queensland pharmacy owners must comply. There are some pharmacy owners that will find themselves in the 2-year transition period. If you think that's you, I would firstly ensure that you have obtained independent advice to make sure it is in fact correct that you are in the 2 years. And if you are in the 2-year period, then of course you do have more time. However, for the majority of pharmacists, you're going to fall into the 1-year transitional period, which means that you have until 2 November 2026 to apply for your pharmacy business licence application. We know from doing many of these licence applications so far that there are still a lot of pharmacists out there that are yet to lodge their applications. The purpose of this episode is not to necessarily remind you to get it going, although you definitely should do that, but to give you a little bit of a heads up of what the process entails so that you can be appropriately prepared and give yourself enough lead time. There are a lot of forms involved in the application process, and the forms vary depending on the ownership structure of your business. So some applications may need some forms that other applications don't need. So the important thing to know is there's a lot of paperwork. We are moving to an online portal in the coming months, which may make things easier. However, at the end of the day, there is still a lot to be completed and you need to be really diligent about it, even if you are engaging a lawyer to assist with your application. When the time comes to prepare your application, there's a lot of information that is going to be asked of you, either from the form itself or through the lawyer that you're engaging to assist. That is a lot of personal information and details, information about your ownership interest across Australia. If you have any trusts or companies involved in your structure, there might be a need to also ask information about your close adult relatives, such as your spouse or adult children. In addition to a heap of personal information, there is also a large suite of documents required as part of the application process. These documents include, if you have trust deeds, your trust deeds, if you're in partnership or a shareholding arrangement, your partnership or shareholders agreement, your lease documents, if you're part of a franchise buying group or license arrangement, the documents relating to that, your current PBS approval certificate, and there might be other documents that are needed along the way. So you really should be proactive about, firstly, working out, are you going to do this application yourself? And look, if you're already time poor, I wouldn't recommend it. If you aren't going to do it yourself, who are you going to engage, and have you engaged them already? Because this workload is quite heavy and it's only going to get busier over the coming months. So make sure you've got your spot in the queue. Then you need to be proactive about getting your documents organised, making sure your lease documents, trust deeds, approval certificates, franchise agreements, etc. are all in one place, easy to hand over as part of the application process. Then, if you are using us, for example, to prepare your application, we would ask that you're diligent about the correspondence we send to you. We have tried to make this as organised and efficient as possible, but it does still mean there are a few emails that you need to attend to. And then when we send the draft documents to you for approval, you do need to go through them carefully and make sure they're correct, and then we'll go through the signing process with you. If there are close adult relatives involved in your ownership structure, you should also give them a heads up that they'll be receiving information which needs to be completed, signed and returned. Now, for most people lodging their applications, if it's the first time lodging, they need to have their identity confirmed by an approved verifier, and there's a list of those in the relevant form. They do include a pharmacist as well as a legal practitioner and JP. That requires the person being verified to attend on an approved certifier with particular documents relating to their ID. So, of course, photo ID we all commonly have, driver's license, passport, etc. However, if it is one of your close adult relatives being certified, it is possible they will need to produce their marriage certificate, or if they are your adult child, their birth certificate. Now, those documents are not as readily available to many of us, and we are finding that we're going into COI meetings and people don't have those documents ready. So making sure you're reading the correspondence that comes to you to adequately prepare for these meetings, and then that you're actually having those documents ready to go during your meeting. So, as I said, this episode is more of a heads up that the process does take some time, there is paperwork, and you need to be organised. And given we're already 1 June and we've only got 5 months to go in the first transitional period, I would recommend getting onto this as soon as possible. If we can assist, by all means reach out. We are doing a lot of this work and we'd be more than happy to help you and your pharmacy business. That's all for this week. I'll chat to you next week.